Hello friends, it's me again. My name is Lana and I'm here with Greg. You guys loved Greg so much. You guys have been so sweet to me in the comments and on Reddit. You guys gave me some good feedback and it really put an energizer battery up my butt because I'm ready to go for the next one. I've got my notes again. So today I'm going to get into the biggest mass UFO sighting in all of the Southern Hemisphere. So picture this. It's a regular day in Melbourne. Kids are playing sport on the oval when all of a sudden they look up and they see a freaking spaceship. Next minute, pandemonium is breaking out. Kids are freaking out that it's the end of the world. They're jumping over the fence to try and chase these things. And a teacher is getting his job threatened by the men in black. And by the way, I know my lighting looks crap, but we're just going to move past that. This is my second YouTube video, we're okay. We're okay. So before we get into it, I wanted to quickly go over the terminology. Back in the day, everyone used the term UFO, which we all know means unidentified flying objects, but that kind of got a negative stigma attached to it because whenever you hear UFO, you're thinking little green men, flying saucers, and people wearing friggin' tinfoil hats, okay? So now we use the term UAP. And UAP started getting more traction in around 2010. So it originally stood for unidentified aerial phenomena, but nowadays it's more commonly referred to as unidentified anomalous phenomena. And that is so that it includes not just stuff in the sky, but also stuff underwater and out in space as well. So a UAP is just basically anything that makes a scientist go, what the crap was that? And I couldn't really make up my mind. I flip-flop between the two throughout this story. I wanted to use UFO because that's what they said back in the day when this story happened, but I also wanted to say UAP because that's what we say now and I just couldn't make up my mind. So I'm going to be saying both and they mean the same thing. So it's a regular Wednesday morning on the 6th of April 1966 and it's just 2 days before the Easter term break. So it all happened in Clayton South, which is a southeastern suburb of Melbourne, Australia. And at the centre of it all was Westall High School, now called Westall Secondary College. And at the time, it housed 550 pupils. It was around 10:15 a.m. when a group of students were playing phys ed on the school oval when they looked up and they saw a strange and metallic-y kind of object. And it was just hovering there above one of those big power towers. I think they're called power pylons, and it was on the far side of the oval. Some kids were frozen on the spot staring at it. They were completely transfixed, completely mesmerized, and other kids were screaming, losing their crap because they were thinking that the apocalypse had finally kicked off. I mean, fair enough. Imagine being 12 years old and you're outside playing in school and all of a sudden you see a fucking UFO in the sky. I would have pooped my pants. While the kids are outside absolutely shitting themselves, science teacher Mr. Greenwood is inside the classroom. He's teaching a class when a student named Tanya, she slams the door open and she's screaming, Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer outside. He just thought that she was being dramatic and the kids in the classroom are all laughing and they want to get up and have a geeze, but he's like, no, the bell hasn't gone off yet, stay seated and you can wait till the bell goes off. So around 10 minutes later, the bell goes off and Mr. Greenwood is like, okay, I'll go out and I'll have a look with you. So he goes out with them and sure enough, this strange object is still hovering in the sky. It wasn't just one craft because according to many witnesses, there were actually 2 additional smaller ones that were identical but just smaller in size. And they seemed to be moving around the main one in what seemed to be a coordinated manner as if it was kind of purposeful. It was described that the smaller crafts were either scouting the area or perhaps accompanying the larger one in some sort of formation, but whatever it was, it didn't seem random. According to many of the witnesses, the crafts just stayed there stationary in the sky for about 20 minutes. Now, Moorabbin Airport is only about a 13-minute drive from Westall High School, so it's possible that people already knew that these crafts were in the area and they wanted to send out the closest pilots available. Because people started to notice that up to 5 light aircrafts, possibly Cessnas, started to follow. Now these planes weren't flying in just any normal pattern. They were seen trying to circle the UFOs, they were banking sharply, and they were doing really erratic maneuvers, almost as if they were trying to intercept or keep pace with it. But whenever they would get close, the UFO would just shoot off to another part of the sky. The crafts were clearly trying to play coy with the planes, playing hard to get, you can't get me. So as the object moved away from the school, several witnesses reported that it was headed towards a nearby area known as the Grange. And the Grange is a large open reserve not far from the school. It's only about a few blocks away, and that is where the students normally take part in cross country. Teachers had instructed the students not to leave the school under any circumstances, but the kids are like, bugger you, I'm going. So a number of them jumped over the fence, took off towards the Grange because they wanted to get a closer look at whatever it was that they saw in the sky. And one of those students, well, her name was Terry, and while she didn't actually see the craft land, she did see it in the Grange. She described hearing a low humming or buzzing sound as she approached it, and she said that she could feel an unusual heat coming off it. She said that the craft was silvery grey in colour. It was shaped like a disc or a saucer. It was smooth all over with no visible windows, seams, markings, and along the sides were soft bluey purpley lights. And Terry's description wasn't unique. Others who claimed to have seen the craft up close also described pretty much the same thing. It was a metallic, seamless structure, roughly the size of 2 cars side by side, or basically around the size of a small truck. The surface appeared smooth, like it was a single piece of metal. There were no bolts or rivets, almost as if it was cast out of a mold. So journalist and UFO king Ross Coulthart, he actually met with several of the Westall students later on, and he asked them all to draw what they saw that day, and a lot of the drawings actually kind of look really similar, like in shape and the size of it. They all had similar accounts. Anywho, the craft didn't stay grounded for long. It rose to about 3 or 4 meters off the ground, it turned on its side, and it just took off. It said that it shot off at such an astonishing speed that it just simply vanished. There was no sonic boom, there was no change in air pressure or anything, no gust of wind, nothing. Even today, which is 58 years later, those who were there say that they've never seen anything that could move with the speed and silence like what they saw that day. And after the object disappeared, they noticed that something was left behind. On the ground, there was a large circular depression which was a clearly defined ring. Some described it as being swirled, others like a crop circle, and others said that it looked like it had been scorched or dried out. Accounts do vary slightly, which isn't surprising because it's been almost 6 decades, but what stayed consistent is that something had clearly disturbed the ground in a circular formation where the craft was said to have landed. And even now, actually, the Grange where it landed is still full of trees and shrubbery, except for the area where the craft landed, it's just like dry grass. Not long after the craft took off, Tanya, who was the girl that barged into the science room, well, she was found unconscious close to where the craft took off. She had apparently fainted and she was in shock, and an ambulance had taken her to a nearby hospital. But of course, as with all other UFO stories and whatnot, there are no official records of this. Now, Tanya's friend Jackie, who was also there at the sighting, she's become one of the most vocal witnesses in the years since. She's taken part in interviews, she's been part of documentaries, and her account has always been the same. She said that she and Tanya had been quite close in school, and close enough that she had actually been to Tanya's house a few times. But after the end of that week, which is the last week before the holidays, Tanya never returned to school. No explanation was ever given by the school or her family as to why she didn't return. So Jackie was really concerned. So she went to Tanya's house over the school holidays, and someone else that she had never seen before answered the door. And they were like, Tanya doesn't live here. Not just that Tanya's not home, they're saying that she didn't live there at all. So Tanya just vanished, and no one actually heard from her until only a couple of years ago, where she came forward and explained her story. According to Tanya, she had quite a prominent career, and she chose not to speak publicly about the Westall sighting out of fear that it would affect her professional credibility. But as she put it, as you get older, you just don't really care what people think anymore. So what was her version of events? Well, Tanya corroborated the story about playing in the field and running into Mr. Greenwood's science class, but when she spoke about the rumours of fainting and having to be brought to the hospital by an ambulance, well, she says that she may have fainted, possibly from hyperventilating from all the adrenaline and the excitement, but she actually has no memory of this at all. What she does remember, though, is the following day at school. She said that she was in class when the principal came and got her, and he brought her to a room with 2 men in it. He didn't say anything, he just silently walked her to this room. Tanya recalls that the 2 men were quite polite and respectful to her, and she thinks that was possibly because she was just a kid. But they were really interested in her experience, and they wanted to know all the answers. They had heaps of questions to ask. And when Tanya told them that it was definitely not a weather balloon, the men allegedly admitted that it was a government thing that they had been testing. They told her that no one in the world was meant to know what it was because it would be bad for Australia. So Tanya said that she was explicitly instructed not to say anything about her experience, especially not to the interviewers and the media who were waiting outside of the school. She was told to stay quiet. She remembered that the men sounded different like the people that she had heard on TV. And back in those days, we didn't have a lot of Australian TV shows. So she didn't connect the dots until later on in life that the men that she had spoken to were actually American. And what about her so-called disappearance? She explained that she had never actually disappeared at all. She had a single mother and she just found some cheaper accommodation and then they moved. That's it. There was no vanishing story, no secret abduction. She had just moved houses. So within about 40 minutes of the sighting, the Air Force, the Army, they had both shown up to the school and the Grange, and they had set up people at different entry points so that no one could get in. But obviously this is not going to stop the kids because this was kind of their backyard and ain't no dude in a suit is going to stop them. There was also a group of unidentified men in unmarked cars, and they were making their presence known because they were meticulously combing through the area. So now we're going to fast forward to about 2 weeks after the sighting, where something strange will happen to Mr. Greenwood, the science teacher. So according to Mr. Greenwood, 2 men came to his home and they claimed to be on official government business. They questioned him in detail about what he saw that day, and Mr. Greenwood basically explained what he and the students had witnessed: a strange object in the sky, its shape, its behaviour, and the presence of light aircraft seemingly trying to pursue it. But after he had finished explaining this to the 2 men, they told him that he actually hadn't seen anything at all. And Mr. Greenwood was like, well, I was there and you weren't, so how do you know what I did or didn't see? And this is when the threats began. They warned him that it would not be in his best interest to continue talking about this, not to students, not to other teachers, not to the media. And they also said that if he did share this, then clearly he would have been drunk on duty and he would need to be reported to the education department, which would cost him his job. And then they told him that if he did still persist, he would be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act. Before we continue with the Mr. Greenwood situation, I just wanted to give you a quick rundown on the Official Secrets Act because I did look it up. Australia has never actually had an Official Secrets Act. It's actually a UK law that they've had for over a century. However, Australia has adopted elements of the UK's secrecy legislation through Section 70 of the Crimes Act 1914. And under this section, it is an offence to disclose classified or official government information without proper authorisation. Moving on, years later, Mr. Greenwood would share these experiences in an interview with Ross Coulthart, where he says that he couldn't then, nor can he now, use his scientific training or knowledge of the world to provide a rational explanation on what happened that day. In this conversation, he also recalled being approached by Professor James McDonald, who was an American atmospheric physicist who had developed a keen interest in UFOs. Professor McDonald had been sent to Australia as part of a broader investigation into unidentified flying objects, reportedly authorised by then President of the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson, and he was the president after JFK. And at the time, James McDonald was reviewing and comparing UFO reports from around the world, and Australia had become quite a notable hotspot, which isn't fair. Like, I've been here 32 years and I've not seen anything ever. It's crap. McDonald interviewed Mr. Greenwood, and here is some actual audio footage, and I've put the subtitles on it, so that should help you out.
We're never sure at any stage that it was anything else but airborne. The first thing I can say is I observed the object that everyone was looking at. It took me a while to see it. It was grey against the, coming on to autumn, blue-grey sky. I couldn't see it immediately, as everyone saying, it's there, you're blind, sort of. I finally picked up what they were looking at.
Was it quite small in size?
Well, the only thing I've got to compare it against is later on there were some small aircraft, Cessna size aircraft. It was approximately 2/3 the length of one of those. When they were there, it was they were sort of circling it. They were.
So the absolute size is known.
It is approximately 2/3 plus or minus. It was on its own when we first saw it. The next thing we noticed was the presence of one of these light planes. I say Cessna type, I don't know what it was exactly. One of a light plane which approached it and then to try and move around, but the object moved over to another part of the sky very rapidly, followed it over, moved back again. It seemed to be playing a cat and mouse with the plane. Then more than one plane arrived. Again, it was counted there were 5 planes there.
There was a hovering motionless when you saw it?
Well, it did several things. It did hover at different times. It seemed to be able to accelerate and disappear out of sight, and then someone would see it over in another part of the sky, through and after, I suppose, 30 degrees away from us. In other words, it moved considerable distance very rapidly. Now, it was just at any stage to me, cigar shape, except on occasions it appeared to bulge in the middle.
It's change shape?
The best way I can describe this, hold a, I won't say saucer, I say plate. Hold a plate on edge and it looks straight across, tip it slightly and you see it bulge in the middle. That type of effect. I can't say that's what was happening, of course, but that's what it appeared to be.
You didn't have a distinct impression of whether that was the cause.
I didn't know whether that was the cause or whether it actually was bulging in the middle.
So while Mr. Greenwood was being silenced, the media had already started doing their part trying to downplay the event, because the very next day following the sighting, the Age newspaper ran a brief piece suggesting that the object seen over the Clayton Moorabbin area was probably a weather balloon. It says, an unidentified flying object seen over the Clayton Moorabbin area yesterday morning might have been a weather balloon. Hundreds of children and a number of teachers at Westall School, Clayton, watched the object during morning break. They said a number of small aeroplanes circled around it. However, a check later showed that no commercial, private or RAAF pilots had reported anything unusual in the area. The Weather Bureau released a balloon at Laverton at 8:30 a.m. and westerly wind blowing at the time could have moved it into the area where the sighting was reported. Also, side note, it's always the same thing when it comes to UFOs. It's always a weather balloon. They said the same thing when it came to Roswell. I want to know why they won't tell us. Is it because they think that our brains actually can't comprehend? Because I've heard people say that our brains actually cannot comprehend what is happening. It's almost as if you're trying to explain an engine and how it works to an ant. Like, there is no way to explain that to an insect, and that's how they liken it to us. But students and teachers, they weren't buying it, and they still don't now. And while I was researching this, I saw a video by Grant Levac named The Westall Witnesses, and you should really watch it. It's actually really good. And Joy Teague explains it so well. I was like, you go, girlfriend.
Why in heaven's name would you have Army, Air Force, police, men in black, ambulance people? What for? A weather balloon? Yeah, right. What do they think we were? So, and I mean, they were there for a long time. They weren't just there weren't they? They were hanging around, and they're coming and going all afternoon.
They were there for a couple of days.
Oh, yeah.
What a queen. Do it, lady. So while most of the witnesses were students or teachers or locals, there has been one person who has become deeply connected to this case, and his name is Shane Ryan. Now, Shane wasn't a student at Westall. He actually had nothing to do with it at all, but he was a former teacher and researcher, and he stumbled across this story while he was looking up other notable UFO stories around Australia. And he was really shocked by the fact that this was such a large mass UFO sighting, and it had basically received little to no attention. So Shane decided to do something about it, and he made it his mission to bring more attention to it. He started researching the event, extensively interviewing witnesses, he tracked down records, he filed FOIA requests, and he even handed out flyers in the local area hoping that someone who had been there that day might come forward with their account. And it worked, because he had been contacted the next day by a man called Paul Smith, and Paul had worked on a property next to the Grange back in 1966. Paul recalled that on the morning of the sighting, he had been loading carrots because they were getting ready for the market, and that's when he looked up and he saw something in the sky. At first he thought it was someone just projecting a movie into the sky because it just didn't seem real. He had never seen anything like it before. But then his boss turned and he saw it as well, and the two just stood there for ages just staring at it. But what stood out to Paul the most was that this object seemed to have some kind of awareness. He said that the moment the craft seemed to realise he had been looking at it, it started to begin changing shape. Its form began to shift and it started to become translucent, as if it was fading out of existence. Paul Paul compared it to a rainbow and how it begins to disappear and how the light changes. He said the object gradually faded until it was barely visible and then it vanished altogether. He said that it didn't feel mechanical, it seemed really intelligent. Then shortly after that, Paul sees a convoy of trucks arrive, and he remembered them looking like military trucks. They were khaki coloured and some were covered in camouflage, and they were accompanied by a few jeeps. He estimated that about 20 men in uniform had got out and they had moved towards the area where the UFO had landed. Paul wasn't the only one who had witnessed this apparent military presence, because Shane Ryan also spoke with Les Mediu, who at the time had been working as an apprentice mechanic. Les and his sister had gone to the Grange to investigate after the sighting, and they were hiding behind a tree with low branches to avoid being seen. He said that he saw 2 army trucks rock up, and then 4 men got out. 2 were in camouflage and 2 were in blue uniform. Les claimed that one of the men began sweeping the area with what seemed to be a metal detector right around where the craft had landed, and then men began kicking at the ground trying to destroy the circular impression, and then they got in their trucks and they took off. So a military historian by the name of Lieutenant, I don't know, Colonel Neil Smith, he weighed in on the sightings of the uniforms that Les had recalled, and he said that the Australian forces were not wearing camouflage at that time, and neither were the British people. However, the uniforms did match the description of the United States Air Force at the time, which I thought was weird, like the Air Force is wearing camo, is that right? Shane Ryan had also tracked down another man, Kevin Hurley, and he had been a university student back in 1966, and Kevin had visited the Grange on the day of the sighting as well, and he also saw the circular depression in the grass, but it's what he remembers a week later that really stuck with him. He returned back to the Grange wanting another look, and that's when he noticed that the entire Grange had been mowed. He said the grass was gone, and when he walked up to where the UFO had landed, he had noticed that the grass had been burnt. So basically someone had come back and deliberately tried to hide any evidence that it was there. Now I think the crafts were in the Melbourne area for a few days beforehand, because 4 days before the Westall sighting, a young engineer, I couldn't find his name, he was taking photos in his mother's garden when he saw a big flash of light in the sky. So he grabbed his Polaroid, he grabbed it so fast he whacked himself in the face with it. Yeah, you show him a demonstration, Greg. You demonstrate. He did agree with the other accounts that it looked like it was made of some sort of metal. He described that it had tipped on its side so that he could see the bottom of it. It gave a little bit of a bounce, and then it rocketed away at a very high speed. And he said that it was instantaneous, almost as if it had been shot out of a gun. Once again, the Air Force personnel rocked up at his doorstep, and they wanted to know what he had experienced. He said that they had a book full of images that he got to go through, and these men did admit to him that they were indeed unidentified flying objects. And then 2 days before the Westall sighting, a man by the name of Ronald Sullivan, he was living in Maryborough at the time, which is about 2 hours and 20 minutes from Westall. He was out driving at night time when he saw a light on the right hand side of the road, and he thought that it was just a tractor working at night time. But as he was getting closer to it, the headlights of his car started to pull towards the light. He said that he felt the car as well as his chest be tugged towards the light as well. So with his car, he had to correct it by steering to the left, and he ended up almost hitting a tree. So Ronald said that on the 6th or the 7th, which was a couple of days later, he heard on the radio that a young man had been killed in a car accident at the same area where he had experienced this. And he was able to make his way to the crash site with a friend of his named Hugh, where they noticed a bunch of dead birds and again another circular impression in the ground, which he said was roughly 9 to 10 feet in diameter and 6 to 8 inches deep. So what happened to these 3 encounters, specifically the Westall High School one? They remain Australia's most interesting unsolved mysteries. I mean, you've got about 200 witnesses, but officially nothing has happened. I do think it's important to keep an open mind because it has been almost 6 decades, so obviously memories can change a little bit. There's going to be some accounts that contradict others, but mostly and overall, a lot of the accounts match up with each other. These days, there's a UFO-themed playground at the Grange, and that features vibrant, alien-themed alien themed designs along with information plaques all around the place. And these serve as a public acknowledgement of the Westall UFO sighting. They offer a brief history of the event and they explain what happened that day. One of my thoughts here is that I think, this might sound crazy, but I think like the CIA or the FBI have something to do with movies being made, because say that like the Men in Black thing, hear me out, if you flood pop culture with alien related stuff, then when someone actually experiences it and they tell someone, then they're just going to be like, you're crazy, you've been watching too many movies. So it's like the perfect way to discredit someone without saying anything. But I want to hear your point of view. Have you ever heard of the Westall case before? And if not, what do you think? Did I explain it well? Did you understand it? Do you think that it actually happened? Or do you think that there's another explanation for it? So here's Greg again. He's a bit of a sleepy boy right now. Do you guys like my makeup? I did it just for you. I was actually thinking about doing a makeup video because I didn't want to wait like 2 weeks in between. But yeah, if you could please leave me a comment. I know that the YouTube algorithm gods, they're really tough on a new channel. So in order for me to get a little bit more traction, those likes and subscribes, they really help me. And like I said, I got 20 friggin' subscribers on my first video. That's pretty good. ChatGPT said that that is above average for your first video. So that's all right. But yeah, leave me a comment if you think that there are any other cool videos that you'd like me to do or anything else. Maybe like a about me, kind of introducing myself to you. I'd be happy to do that as well. I think I've already started my next one. I think the next one is going to be another alien one. And then the one after that is going to be not a true crime, but like just a story that had happened, which everyone knows about. It only happened a couple of years ago, but I'm not going to say what it is. You have to stay tuned. I also heard a conspiracy that people think that birds aren't real. They're just government drones, which I don't know if I really subscribe to that. But what I do think is weird, which I noticed in the past few years, is that birds, like they flap their wings, but they just stay there. Like they're just flapping their wings and they're staying in the same spot. And I don't remember seeing that when I was little. And if I did, I just never paid attention. That's something new that I've started to see. And I think that's a bit suspicious, but I also don't think that it's a government drone. I don't know. Maybe the birds they just don't know where they're going. You know? I'm going to introduce you to Hanky. This is Hanky. This is Greg's big brother. Hanky, say hi. Hanky, look at the camera. Say hi. Good boy. We've only got the two. We've got Hank and Greg. Thank you guys again for your support for the first one. I actually didn't intend on doing a second video, really. I did consider it, but I just wanted to do the Aaron Patterson video because I hadn't seen anything else like it out there, and I just thought I'll do it. Someone needs to hear it. I wanted it. I couldn't find it, so I'll just do it. And then, yeah, I just kind of got, like I said, a battery put up my butt and I was ready to go. So I'm like, okay, we'll just do this one and we'll just see what happens. I'm going to keep doing this. I've decided for as long as it's fun for me. Yeah, I really think that it's important that we talk about this conspiracy and UAP stuff, because the more the government know that we know, then maybe we'll get disclosure soon, you know? Anyway. We'll see you in the next one, maybe about conspiracies. Bye.